So I'm trying to understand at what point does the editorial standard of journalistic behaviour kick in as opposed to these. If they want to be commentators, great. Let's just say they're commentators. They are not journalists. They are not reporting the news. They are not reflecting the broad society. They are reflecting their own opinions.
Well, Senator, I disagree, but I mean, our editorial policies expect us to be relevant to all Australians, so we need to cover these events. I mean, the editorial policies, state that we need to provide opportunities over time for principal relevant perspectives on matters of contention to be expressed. So that's what we're doing, providing a diversity of perspectives.
Journalists provide that as opposed to commentators.
As a part of our news and current affairs, we're showcasing the perspectives of Australians.
Okay, but don't your journalists report on things, not provide the perspective?
It's not our perspective, Senator. It's the perspectives of the people that we're interviewing.
That's not journalism.
That's her perspective.
Yeah, that is not
That's
journalism.
not. It's her perspective. If you wanted to have a commentator on, if you wanted to have Noel Pearson on and him commentating, that's going to be a viewpoint. If you want to have Karen Little on and ask her view, that's a viewpoint commentator, not a journalist. She is a journalist.
She's a journalist.
She needs to report facts. Yet we never seem to. I mean, the reason we are here for so long every time Mr. Anderson has to front up here is because there is a breach of this standard time and time and time again. There is a breach of social media policy time and time and time again. I mean, Mr. Anderson, you and I have now discussed anti-Semitism far more than I ever thought I would be discussing anti-Semitism in the current day and age, and this is long before the pogrom on October 7th. We have been discussing the viewpoints of people that were allocated to the Middle East Bureau or hired by the Middle East Bureau. This is systematic issues through the editorial. And, Mr. Anderson, you have been subjected to a no-confidence motion. I mean, do you run the organisation, or do these activist journalists, or whatever they are, not in the old-school journalism, these activists, do they run the ABC? Because clearly what they say, what they think, what they feel is what they just put out there, whether it's on your ABC Indigenous platform, whether it's on ABC News Breakfast. We know we've had PK have goes on her radio program. You know, when does this stop? I would love to say come to estimates for half an hour.
Senator Hughes, is there a question in there?
There is a question. Well, when does it stop? And I mean, do we need to put the editorial standard in Das Kapital and hand it out? Because they might actually read that.
Senator, well, first I'd say, and you of course have your perspective with regard to what you see as standards. First of all, I am the Managing Director, and yes, I lead the organisation. People can express concern, either in group or in part. I've met with the MEAA. I've met with people in other groups as well, away from the union, as I would normally do from time to time. What I would say is that when it comes to those standards are important to us, and they are tested, and occasionally, not systematically, occasionally when we do breach, we put our hand up for it. We do have an ombudsman that is looking at complaints, of course, and that is against the standards. When you mentioned Bridget Brennan before, so yes, we got a number of complaints with regard to that. That will be with the Ombudsman. The Ombudsman will look at it and then provide determination. My perspective on that, I've heard what you've said, but my perspective on that is in that cross that reporter, yes, the First Nations reporter, was giving a perspective that was held. Doesn't mean that it's the perspective of all First Nations Australians, but that was a perspective that was held. That will be tested through what is the complaints process as to whether or not it breached our standards. I think there is always ongoing training with our standards, as I mentioned earlier. They are important. I'm not going to dismiss that because they are important. They're fundamental to who we are. I think, and it needs to be, and this is the point I think you're making, devoid of who you are, where you're from, where you live, what your socio-economic background is, what your political background is. Those standards must always be maintained. And I would say, by and large, they are maintained. So the Ombudsman's report comes out, it's a 12-month report, that comes out it's due to come out in 4 weeks' time. I haven't seen it, it'll go to the board next week, then it will be released. The results in there will show where there have been complaints upheld and complaints resolved, which suggests that there is something that needed to be fixed with that, and then divided up into categories, whether it was impartiality, whether it was accuracy, etc. I'm confident those results will not see a systemic bias that's within the ABC, but it'll tell us. It always tells us something about how well we're meeting those standards.
Can I just? I'll give you back the call in a minute. I just want to cover some.
Just final comment. I don't care in the news if you're white, you're black, you're a woman, you're a man, you're gay, you're straight, you're wealthy, you're Catholic, you're Jewish, you're Muslim. Could not care. Just tell me just report what's going on. That's all you need to do. Don't care about anything else. That's what a journalist does.